Our guest today is Lynette Mullen. Lynette is going to talk today about domestic violence. She's given some wonderful speeches, and I was so impressed that it's my honor to have her on today. Please welcome Lynette Mullen.
Hi. Thank you very much, Rebecca. Hello.
So great to have you.
Thank you.
Tell us about domestic violence.
I think it is very important that people don't make assumptions. And it's easy to do. We all do it. We do it every day because we cannot easily understand a situation that somebody else finds themselves in. And so we do make assumptions, especially about things like domestic violence when we are so sheltered growing up, hopefully. We just don't understand it. And I think it's very important that we start to if we're really going to make a difference in the community.
It is very important to understand because a person can't judge something they really don't understand.
Exactly.
And they don't understand a person's feelings, motives, and needs at that time.
Exactly. I used to work for the district attorney's office here in Humboldt County, and one of the things that the head of the victim witness office, Joyce Mosier, used to say a lot is that when someone hears about a woman or a person in a domestic violence situation, the question is always, why didn't she leave? Why didn't the victim leave? And the thing she said is the thing that is never asked is, why didn't the abuser stop? Why is it always on the victim to leave? Why is it we don't have this standard of behavior for everyone and take it from that perspective? It's a very different perspective than putting the responsibility on the victim, which is part of what causes it and perpetuates it in the first place.
We have a whole society that puts the responsibility on the victim. They say, why did you believe him? Why did you let it happen? The fact that you may be the littlest and have children to take care of and need for survival is, oh, that's minor.
Absolutely. Well, and that's the thing that people don't understand, and I think they don't want to understand, is of course when somebody is experiencing abuse, when somebody is being hurt, they want it to stop. They absolutely want it to stop. But the thing we need to remember is a lot of times they're in a relationship with somebody they care about. So it's not that they want that person to go away. It's not that they don't love their abuser. It's just that they want that abuse to stop. And they have a relationship with that person for a reason. So they want it to stop. So that's one thing. The other thing that I don't know that people understand is all of the barriers to leaving.
Let's take that desire to have it stop. What can they do about that?
Unfortunately, I'm not an expert, but I have worked with a number of people, and there are things that people can do. Certainly getting out of the situation when you're in immediate danger, most important. You want to get away, you want it to stop one way or another. Letting people know, letting neighbors and friends know what's going on so that if you are in danger, you can call on them to help. Because just because something's happening and you decide you want to leave doesn't mean you're physically able to without help. And so I think that's very important.
So then your suggestion is when the temperature is rising, so to speak, get away from the fire.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Try to recognize when that is happening before it escalates to the point where it does turn violent or abusive. I think that's important. And I think it's good, hopefully, and I know this doesn't always work, and unfortunately I've been in relationships where communication is not the best, but if it's possible to talk to your partner about learning how to recognize those signs before it gets to that point. Because I'd like to hope that even the person that may turn violent, if they could make a conscious choice and do it early on, they would choose not to behave that way. And that's not always true, and I do realize that. There are some people that are physically aggressive, that enjoy it, that are drawn to it, that are non-apologetic about it. But I would like to believe that there are others out there that want help stop it.
In other words, you'd like to believe that those that are controlling their mate out of fear of losing it could be causing the very problem they're afraid of and maybe dealt with in a better way.
I would hope so. There's so many times when we make decisions unconsciously. We don't even realize that we're doing what we're doing, and it has the result that it has. Somebody, again, like you were saying, maybe a partner that is afraid of losing their partner or is jealous or feeling insecure, all they're feeling is anger and acting on that anger when really the root of the problem is insecurity or fear. So if they're able to identify kind of those root causes for those feelings, they can deal with them maybe in a different way with a much safer and healthier outcome.
Well, anger and fear are brothers.
But, I used to work for a treatment program years ago, and there was something that was said and said over and over again that's resonated with me over the years, which is anger is generally some combination of fear and pain.
Yes.
And we don't want to feel either one of those. Most people don't. They are very, very uncomfortable. They make us feel vulnerable. We don't like them. And so if we can feel anger instead, which instead of fear and pain, where that we're not controlling that, we feel helpless, anger is something we can project. So it's like taking our power back and doing something about it. So it's empowering us even if it's not in a healthy way. So it makes sense. It's not necessarily a healthy response, but it certainly makes sense when you think about it.
So a person that deals with their mate in anger because they're fear motivated or in pain is actually escalating the very problem that they're afraid of. Most of the time. Most of the time,
if not all the time, certainly. And aggression and violence is never a way to deal with differences or deal with something you're uncomfortable with. It just isn't.
It's interesting. In our society, we tend to raise our boys to believe that it's either control or be controlled. Self-control is so conveniently left out of it, where self-control is really the only answer.
Absolutely. I have this response to that word, control.
Right.
Because if we think that self-control, then I think that also, if we talk about that, then we think we can control our emotions. I don't know that we can. It's just our responses, our behaviors, that we can make choices about.
True. The only way to really control our emotions in our life is to understand where they're coming from and how to deal with them.
Absolutely.
So if you're really going to control them, you don't put them in a box and nail a lid down.
Right.
That's the difference between power and force.
Right.
Real power is understanding and using it correctly.
Right.
Force is putting it in the box and nailing the lid down.
Right. We were talking about men maybe that are inclined towards violence when they're feeling fearful or whatever's going on. One of the challenges I think that people run into, and women as well, is there's no safe place to process those feelings. As you said, we raise our boys, they're in control of and to be in control of everything. And when men are feeling vulnerable or afraid, where do you go with that? And we really don't have a lot of ways in our culture and our society for men to process those feelings in a healthy way,
right,
so that things don't escalate, so that they don't end up with all these feelings they don't understand and exhibiting them inappropriately. It's tough, and I think it's something that needs to be talked about.
I think if we had more places where guys could go into a group chat room and really learn how to vent and cope and scope.
Absolutely.
And understand themselves and understand cause and effect to the point that they can create the cause and effect they want to really fulfill the things they truly want, instead of letting them become actually manipulated by the things that they don't understand in their own lives.
Yeah, I think that's very true. And to find out they're not alone. There was like I said, I used to work at a treatment program, and I would do intakes. So I would talk to folks who were addicted, who had troubles or were addicted to drugs and alcohol. And the initial intake, the thing that struck me over and over and over again is that people would come in, they'd be struggling with these issues, very personal and generally very private. There weren't a lot of people that knew they were dealing with their addiction, and generally had other things going on as well. And they felt so alone and so wrong. Like something was wrong with them. Like they were broken and they were the only one that was broken. And nobody could understand and nobody could know. It was like this secret thing. But then the next person would come in and would say the same exact thing. And it's like this sense of isolation and like something is wrong with you when you're feeling all these feelings, or you have this inclination towards violence, or whatever it is. I think so many people, because we're so socially isolated, feel like it's only them, where it's not. I mean, so many people are so isolated and experience the same exact thing that I always wanted to go, and I couldn't, of course. I mean, confidentiality, I certainly couldn't disclose anything that anybody had said, but I always wanted to be like, Joe, you really ought to talk to Tom here, because you guys are going through the same thing, and maybe if you talk to each other, you'd realize that it's more common than you think, and you could work through it rather than just thinking something's wrong with you. But the thing is, I think there are opportunities for men to do that, for people to do that. You just need to take a chance. You got to reach out to somebody. You have to look for a church group or a men's group, or take a buddy fishing and mention something, just a little something to start opening those lines of communication.
I think for guys, the most important thing is to realize that they're human.
Absolutely.
And human, they don't have to be Superman.
Yeah.
They're not Superman. They're human. Human beings make mistakes. They have feelings and emotions.
Absolutely.
And to be with someone where it's safe to be human and deal with coping with their humanity and finding how to use it to their best interest.
Absolutely.
And men don't have that option a lot.
No, well, I remember as a little girl, there was a day, and I don't know if there was a noise downstairs in our house, but my stepfather was afraid and let it be known that he was scared of something, and I can't even remember what it was specifically. But until that moment, I honestly and truly didn't know that men got scared.
Wow.
I knew women did. I knew girls did. I did not understand that men also got scared.
Well, true courage is to know that you're afraid, be afraid, whatever you have to do, deal with it anyway.
Yeah.
And we don't really openly allow our guys that premise.
Just by talking about domestic violence, certainly none of what we're talking about excuses violence or behaving violently as a way to cope with your emotions. I certainly want to make that clear. But I think really understanding where these things come from is the only way, ultimately, to address and deal and hopefully change it.
In other words, guys, there's really no right way to do the wrong thing.
Oh, very good. What? Absolutely.
On the reasons women stay.
Complicated. Because you look at the surface and you look at a woman as a victim, and of course none of us want to be victims or relate to a victim. So I think our immediate response is, well, she should get out. She should deal with it, right? It's on her and she should be dealing with it. But the reality is, unfortunately, is there are so many barriers. The first, as we talked about earlier, is a lot of times these women care about their husbands or their partners, and they don't want to leave. They care about them. It's that they don't want the violence to be a part of that relationship. But there are other barriers as well. If you think part of the pattern, unfortunately, with a lot of domestic violence, especially serious domestic violence, is that the perpetrator, the abuser, will slowly start to isolate the victim, isolate the woman, their wife or their partner, whoever that is. And so over time that person becomes more socially isolated. They don't have the social support, the network, even the family ties that maybe they had in the beginning. That abuser will kind of separate his victim, her victim, from the family as a way to protect themselves, of course, but also just kind of to manipulate that person. And so if a victim decides that they want to leave or they need to leave or finally recognizes this is a dangerous situation and they need to do something about it, they often don't have a lot of support. And that becomes problematic in a lot of ways, because what we're talking about here, if there's a woman or a man that is choosing to leave a domestic situation, generally they are the ones that need to leave. So we're talking about them leaving their homes. If they've got children, we're talking about them leaving their homes with children, children. Or, so you're talking about ripping children from their home and then being solely responsible for those children as well. So even if you're in a situation where maybe your partner is violent towards you, if that partner is a good parent, you're also talking about pulling your children away from that partner, from their parent, which is it's important to consider that, and it is a significant factor. And then we're not even talking about the economic implications of that yet. If I am a woman and I've got 2 kids under 5, and I'm leaving my home, and maybe I've got part-time employed, or my partner successfully kind of isolated me and I don't have any employment.
We're talking about survival.
We're talking, how do you? Where do you go? What do you do? Especially if you've been isolated from your family, if you don't have a lot of friends, or even if you do. The natural inclination for a lot of people is not to burden other people. And so if I've got my 2 little girls, and I have my car, and all the clothes I can fit in my car, and that's all I've got, I don't want to go sleep on my friend Susie's couch for a month while I figure out what's going on and get a job and figure out all that other stuff. It's really, really hard. It's hard if you're not leaving a situation. Just raising children is hard, let alone taking all of that on, being emotionally burdened anyway because of what you've been through. It's huge. What we're talking when you say just leave, what you're talking about having these women take on is incredible.
It's another factor as well. it's the embarrassment and the shame and the fact that you don't want your friends and your family to know that this has been going on.
Absolutely.
And if you ask for their help, there's no way to hide that.
Well, and the thing is, too, and we used to talk about this when I was in the district attorney's office, Paul Gallegos. We assume that it's the lower economic families, people that are struggling. We make assumptions, but that's not true. And so not only are you talking about the embarrassment, but you're also talking about the potential of people not even believing her. There's a lot of good guys out in the community that aren't necessarily such good guys.
Most people don't believe the abuser because statistics show, if you've read Lundy Bancroft's books, which are almost in every woman's shelter, the guy is a great author, love his stuff. He grew up in an abusive situation that was terrible, and he became a very dynamic professional author on that very subject, and has helped a lot of women and men. But the point being, most guys that abuse have one nice guy face for the public.
Absolutely.
And a monster face at home.
Right.
They'll go help the neighbors, they'll be there, they'll help the neighbor lady fix her washer, and go home and abuse their wife. And people don't understand that that is a common M.O.
Absolutely. And so that's yet another barrier that a victim would face if they choose to leave the relationship, is they may not be supported. Well, he's a nice guy. Exactly. You know, why would you leave it? Why would you break his heart? You know, and of course for him, part of that public face would then be denial,
of course.
Hurt, you know, all of being lost, losing your family. I mean, there's so much that goes into, and it doesn't mean that victims shouldn't leave, that they couldn't leave. But I think as people, if we know, if we start to understand what these victims are facing, I think we can learn, hopefully, to support them in a way that helps to stop them from being abused. That's the hope. But I would certainly hope that if we could understand and support victims more, then it might go towards stopping the problem.
I've been told that we have more shelters for dogs and cats than we have displaced people that have been abused. Is that true?
I believe that is true. I knew of a situation. This was a situation where it was a married couple. She was being abused. There were 2 kids in the house. She was not as educated or familiar with the legal system as her husband was, and so he got a restraining order against her and had her removed from the house. He had the kids. She had no income. She had nowhere to go, and ended up homeless. She fortunately found the mission here in Eureka, but there was no place for her to go. It was awful. It was horrible. And that is true. Humboldt Domestic Violence Services, fortunately, we do have a program here in Humboldt County that's very well respected and very committed to helping victims of domestic violence get back on their feet again. They offer shelter. They provide the women victims with the support and the skills and the tools they need, hopefully, to start rebuilding their lives somewhere else. Because that's literally what we're talking about. We're talking about a woman in a lot of ways, or a man, leaving their life and having to rebuild it, which is daunting for anybody, let alone somebody with the emotional, bringing trauma with them.
They do bring a lot of pain with them, because they wouldn't be there in that condition if it weren't so, because that's extremely painful. All of your hopes, your dreams, your life is falling apart.
Absolutely. Well, and a lot of them feel like something must be wrong. I remember talking to one woman, exceptionally bright, amazing woman, who said that she kept thinking that there must be something about her that prompted her partner to abuse her. Because if she was fine, he wouldn't be doing it. If there wasn't something wrong with her, if he wasn't drawn to, if she didn't deserve it in some way, he wouldn't be doing it. In her mind, that was her logic. You know, so to come out of that, taking responsibility.
Most abusers blame their partner for the abused victim.
Yes.
Most of them tell them from the time they're a little kid, if they're abused as a child, you made me do this, you caused this, you deserve this. So they start beating on the child, telling him that. Now, if this kid grows up and they marry somebody or fall in love with somebody that uses the same pattern, they still believe it because it's been reinforced sort of hypnotically over the years.
Absolutely. Sure, but I do believe that a lot of the perpetrators also truly believe that. They don't want to take responsibility for what they're doing, so they really, honestly, truly believe that you as the victim, you are making me do this. They're putting the responsibility somewhere else because they don't want to face and believe that they are really capable of doing what they're doing without being prompted externally by something else. They're not taking responsibility. They don't want to. So if they truly believe it, and the victim truly believes it, look where you are.
Well, we have that particular social problem in our society everywhere, not just with abuse. Accepting responsibility as an adult isn't very common anymore.
Well, I don't know about anymore. I mean, I think that dynamic's probably always existed. I have a very strong interest in local history and looking at a lot of the decisions that were made, I mean, in history in general, where it's a lot of the responsibility for my actions I place on somebody else. I think that's common, and I think
you think that's just human nature because we can do it, so we do it.
I think it's very difficult to accept complete responsibility for our lives and our actions and the consequences of our actions. It's scary. It's really scary to think that it is all on me. I mean, hopefully people learn to do that.
Which is more frightening? I'm powerless and I'm responsible for the weight of the world, or I believe in little old me struggling to learn how to cope with life. I don't know which is more scary. Either way, it's frightening.
It is. There's a quote. The quote goes something like, our greatest fear is not that we are powerless. It is that we are powerful beyond measure. It's that we do have the capability to do these things. It's terrifying. I mean, because if we understand our responsibility, we understand that we can make changes, then we also have to understand that if we are not acting on that, that's on us too.
The sins of omission and the sins of commission.
Yeah, inaction, exactly. I think it's a burden for a lot of people that if you can place responsibility elsewhere, you don't have to carry that burden.
It's the fact that many people are terrified of success because from success comes responsibility.
Yes.
And a lot of women marry because they're afraid of success in being responsible in a way that would, in a career way, a breadwinner way. Now, there's a lot of women that don't. I'm just saying there's a great number that actually marry when they're still emotionally, financially, and intellectually immature, and they're seeking a mate to take care of them like Daddy did. These women, when they get in an abusive situation, have an even harder time because they have a tremendous fear of facing life. And then to compound the fracture, now usually and commonly, they've got children.
Right.
So they are immature to start with. They've got children. They're afraid of life. They were afraid to face it on their own. Now they have to face it with children, and that compounds the already huge factor of how do I go to work and stay home at the same time, which means somebody's got to be with the children, somebody's got to be out supporting them. How do I do the impossible? The impossible now has really become impossible. What do I do?
Right. Which leads to, what do we do?
We really need to reach out and help people understand themselves and be unafraid. If we could find a way, and maybe there is one, I know in a lot of places there are, but I don't know what we have locally, in helping women get back on their feet as far as being capable to find a job, to get back out of domestic violence and get back on their feet. And with children, this is really hard because so often we enable them instead of uplift them into a situation where they can take care of themselves. We have a gap that we can't stand very well. If we just enable them and then turn them out loose, they're not okay. You can't just take them home and keep them for a pet for a little while and say, time's up, out. We need that place in between, enabling and helping them become who they can be, strong, confident, and survive. And with that, we need competent child care.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. If more businesses offered competent child care, the ones that have the camera so mom can work at her desk, see the baby, and have confidence my child's in good care, and hopefully in the same building. Companies that can do that are great. So on her lunch hour, she can go hold her baby. This would really turn the working situation around for moms.
Yeah, I think that's very true. Here in Humboldt County, I think the likelihood of that happening often, just because a lot of the employers are very small. I mean, having on-site child care, I think, is
It's a big company luxury at this point.
It's quite difficult, yeah. And childcare is really expensive. I really don't have a good answer to that, other than certainly quality childcare is important. Pushing girls to be educated, but also pushing boys to be self-confident. And one of the things when I was raising my kids, and I had, my daughter was the oldest, and then I had 2 boys, and not that this isn't important, but there were, I was noticing, programs that were specifically designed and focused on empowering my daughter. You know, as a adolescent, as a pre-adolescent, and then an adolescent, it was, you know, North Star Quest Camp, and just a lot of different opportunities to kind of push her to explore her potential and pursue education. And where, quite honestly, and this is again going back to the men, is that I really think that's in a lot of ways that is where the solution to some of these lie, is understanding where people come from. There weren't a lot of programs for my boys. There was not a lot of emphasis on helping them reach their full potential, on having them become competent, educated, confident men, so that they didn't have the need to assert their power in other ways. And so I think we need to be careful, because I think in some ways the pendulum's really swung the other way, where we're all about paying attention to the girls and not the boys. And we need both genders to grow up healthy and strong and confident and self-assured in order for ultimately these things to be resolved.
In some of the churches in the inner city in Oakland, they have programs now, or mentors. Not huge programs, they're actually very small. Each little church tries to set out mentors for the kids. And some of the work that has been done is absolutely beautiful. Maybe that's our answer. If we could strike up the interest in the churches.
I think that is a solution. And certainly there's other organizations here in Humboldt County that serve that need as well. Big Brothers, Big Sisters, I think is incredibly important. Because it provides mentors both for girls and boys. Another thing, and this is kind of going back to the domestic violence and certain conditions kind of leading somebody towards being a victim or maybe being a perpetrator. Organizations like CASA.
Right.
CASA is Court Appointed Special Advocates, and they train members of the community to work with children who are in dependency or in foster care. And certainly those are children just from that point on, when they enter that dependency system, we absolutely know that those kids have been abused or neglected.
Right.
Often both. Without help, without support, it is not as likely that they can grow up to be healthy adults. Where if people can volunteer with CASA, if people can start working with those kids, if they can recognize those emotional needs early and start providing some of that support, letting boys know that even though maybe they were neglected by their parents, that boy is still a worthwhile, strong, confident, intelligent human being capable of all kinds of things, and that he doesn't need to learn how to assert his power by being violent. If you can work with that child, you can stop somebody from growing up to be an abuser or having to control somebody in another way. Same with the girls. If there's a girl that's come out of a situation where they were abused or neglected, if you can empower that girl and let them understand that they don't always have to be a victim, and that it was wrong that they were victimized.
Right.
So there are opportunities, I think, right here in our community where we can make a difference. It's programs like that ultimately will help to stop things like domestic violence.